The patrol ship Harmony moved slowly through the dark edges of space, its engines humming quietly in the emptiness. Officer Vextel sat at his communication station, listening to the usual static and background noise of deep space. It was just another boring day on patrol duty near the Kepler Void, a place every spacer knew to avoid. Then something changed. A weak signal broke through the cosmic noise, crackling and distorted but unmistakably real. Vextel's 4 eyes widened as he adjusted the receivers, trying to clean up the transmission. This is colony ship New Dawn. Engines failing. 50,000 civilians trapped. Stellar collapse imminent. Please, anyone receiving this transmission. The voice was human, filled with desperation that cut through the static. Vextel's tentacles moved quickly across his console, recording every word and running signal analysis. The transmission was coming from deep inside the Kepler Void, a region of space where gravity itself seemed broken. Commander Thekmar slithered over to the communication station, his reptilian scales catching the bridge lights. The Sword Commander had survived 40 years in space by being careful, calculating every risk before making decisions. He looked at the readings with cold yellow eyes. The Kepler Void, he hissed, his forked tongue tasting the air. Show me the exact coordinates. Vextel pulled up the star charts on his screen. A red dot blinked deep within a swirling mass of dangerous space, surrounded by warnings in a dozen different languages. Here, Commander. But sir, no rescue mission has ever returned from the void. The gravitational fields are impossible to navigate. Thekmar nodded slowly, remembering the stories. Just 5 years ago, the mighty Corvin battle fleet had attempted a rescue in the outer edges of the void. 17 ships went in. None came back. Before that, the peaceful telemedical ships had tried to save a research station. They found pieces of the rescue vessels scattered across 3 star systems. 50,000 lives, Vextel said quietly, still listening to the repeating distress call. That's an entire world's worth of people. Dead people, Thekmar corrected. The void doesn't give back what it takes. Mathematics don't lie, officer. The gravitational stress would crush our hull in minutes. The radiation would cook our crew before we got halfway to them. The bridge crew exchanged glances. They all knew the commander was right. Kepler Void was a graveyard that disguised itself as empty space, pulled ships apart with invisible hands, and scattered their atoms across the cosmos. Mark the transmission as received and logged, the Kamar ordered. Send word to Confederation Command. Let them decide if they want to waste more ships on an impossible rescue. We continue our patrol route. The distress call kept repeating, growing weaker with each transmission. Across subspace communication networks, the message reached dozens of ships from different species. Most deleted it immediately. Others forwarded it to their commanders, who made the same calculations Thekmar had made. But somewhere in the darkness of space, one ship received the signal and did something different. Instead of calculating the risks, Captain Lena of the human vessel Defiant calculated how fast her ship could reach the void. She changed course immediately. Captain Lena stared at the star charts displayed on her command screen, her dark eyes tracing the coordinates of the distress signal. The numbers didn't lie. The colony ship New Dawn was trapped deep inside the Kepler Void, a place that every spacer knew meant certain death. Na had spent 15 years in space, and in all that time, she had never abandoned anyone who needed help. Commander Park Jin stood beside her, his face showing the worry that Na was trying to hide. Jin had served with Na for 7 years, and he knew that look in her eyes. It was the same expression she'd worn when they'd rescued miners from an exploding asteroid, or when they'd pulled survivors from a plague ship that other vessels wouldn't even approach. Captain, Jin said carefully, I've run the calculations 3 times. The gravitational fields in the void change every few minutes. Even if we somehow make it to the colony ship, the radiation levels will kill our crew before we can mount any rescue operation. Na turned to face her bridge crew. These weren't just officers under her command, they were her family. She had watched Kim Woo grow from a nervous young engineer into the best ship mechanic in the fleet. She had been there when Pilot Lee's son got married, and Communications Officer Cho Min lost his father. when Dr. Hanyu saved half the crew from a deadly virus. The Defiant wasn't built for this kind of mission, Engineer Kim Woo said from his station, his hands moving nervously over his controls. Our shields are standard military grade, not the specialized equipment you'd need for void operations. The hull stress alone could crack us in half. In command? Jin asked quietly. They'll court-martial the entire crew for disobeying direct orders. You know, they've already written off those colonists. Na nodded slowly. She understood the politics of space rescue operations. 50,000 lives sounded like a lot, but to the bureaucrats at Confederation Command, it was just numbers on a report. They would weigh the cost of losing one military vessel against the slim chance of saving civilians, and the math would always come out the same way. So we don't tell Command, Na said, her voice growing stronger. We change course now, before they have a chance to order us not to. The bridge fell completely silent. Everyone understood what the captain was really saying. This wasn't just about risking their lives, though they would certainly be doing that. This was about choosing to disobey everything they had been trained to do. As military officer's communications officer Cho Min looked up from his station. Captain, if we do this and somehow survive, our careers are over. They'll strip our ranks and discharge us. If we don't do this, Na replied, 50,000 people die while we follow orders and do nothing. She walked to the center of the bridge, looking at each of her crew members. I won't order any of you to come with me. This has to be your choice. Anyone who wants to transfer to another ship when we reach the next station, I'll understand completely. Engineer Kim Woo was the first to speak. Those people have families too, Captain. Kids who are probably scared right now. Well, at least Sun nodded from her position at the helm. I've never run from a fight, not starting now. One by one, each crew member voiced their agreement. Dr. Hanyu, who had seen too much death in her career. Navigator Yu Min, who had lost her own family in a colony disaster years ago. Even young Ensign Bei Ho, who had joined the crew just 6 months earlier. Then it settled. Na said, moving to her captain's chair. Set course for the Kepler Void. Maximum speed. The Defiant changed direction, its engines burning bright. Against the darkness of space as it headed toward the most dangerous region in the galaxy, the moment the Defiant crossed into the Kepler Void, everyone on board knew they had entered hell itself. The ship bucked and twisted like a wild animal as invisible forces grabbed the hull and tried to tear it apart. Captain Na gripped her command chair as the deck plates. Beneath her feet groaned and bent. Warning alarms screamed from every station. Red lights flashed across the bridge as system after system began failing. The main view screen flickered and sparked, showing distorted images of space that seemed to curve in impossible directions. What's happening to the stars? Asked Young. Ensign Bei Ho, staring at the display in confusion. The familiar points of light were stretching and bending, creating strange trails of color that hurt to look at. Gravitational lensing? Navigation officer, Yu Min explained through gritted teeth, her hands fighting with the controls. The void is so dense with collapsed matter that it's bending light itself. I can barely tell which way is forward. Ship lurched violently to the left, throwing several crew members against their stations. Engineer Kim Woo's voice crackled over the intercom from the engine room. Captain, the reactor is struggling to maintain power. These gravity fields are pulling energy right out of our systems. Hull stress now at 60%, reported damage. Control Chief Han Seok, sweat beading on his forehead as he watched his readings climb into the red zone. We're getting microfractures along the outer hull. If this gets worse, we'll start losing atmosphere. Through the chaos and sparking electronics, the sensors finally locked onto their target. The new dawn appeared on their screens, and the sight made everyone on the bridge fall silent. The massive colony ship was dying before their eyes. What? Had once been a beautiful vessel designed to carry families to new worlds was now a broken wreck. Long cracks ran along its hull like spider webs, and bright streams of atmosphere leaked into space like blood from a wound. Pieces of the ship's outer sections had already been torn away by the crushing gravitational forces. My God, whispered Communications Officer Cho Min. Look at the size of that thing. It's 10 times bigger than our ship. Captain A studied the tactical display, her heart sinking as she saw the full scope of the disaster. The colony ship was caught in a slow spiral around what looked like a baby black hole, its orbit getting tighter with each passing minute. Time until the new dawn hits the event horizon. Na asked, though she dreaded the answer. Navigator Yuminza's fingers flew over her calculations, rechecking the numbers twice before responding. 4 hours and 17 minutes, Captain. After that, nothing can save them. The bridge fell silent, except for the constant alarms and the groaning of their own ship's hull. Dr. Hanyu was the first to speak the thought everyone was having. Captain, our emergency transport system can handle maybe 800 people at maximum capacity. Even if we stripped out all the safety protocols and packed people in like cargo, we might get 1,000. 50,000 people, Pilot Lee Sun said quietly, staring at the dying ship. There are children on that vessel, babies.
Captain Na
stood up from her chair, studying the impossible situation. The math was simple. They had 4 hours to move 50 times more people than their ship could handle.
Oh.
Any reasonable person would call it hopeless, but Lina had never been accused of being reasonable. Then we stop thinking about what's possible, she said firmly, and start figuring out how to do the impossible. Within minutes of Captain Na's declaration, the Defiant transformed into a hive of frantic activity. Crew members who had never worked together were suddenly tearing apart their own ship with tools, plasma cutters, and bare hands. The corridors echoed with the sounds of metal being ripped away and systems being rewired. Chief Engineer Kim Woo stood in the main cargo bay, directing the organized chaos around him. "Listen up, everyone," he shouted over the noise. "We're going to turn this ship into the biggest rescue vessel in history. I don't care if it kills the engines or leaves us drifting in space. Those people out there need us." In the weapons bay, Gunner Lee Du was carefully removing the main laser cannons. Each weapon system contained powerful energy converters that could be repurposed to boost the transport systems. "Never thought I'd be happy to get rid of our guns," he muttered to his assistant, Petty Officer Ru Si. "But if it means saving lives, tear them all out." Down the corridor, a team led by Security Chief Jung Ho was stripping armor plating from the outer hull. The thick metal sheets were being cut into smaller pieces and welded together to create emergency evacuation pods. "These won't be comfortable," Jung Ho explained to his team, "but they'll keep people alive long enough to get them to safety." Most heartbreaking work was happening in the crew quarters. Families who had made small spaces into homes were voluntarily destroying everything they owned. Pilot Lee Sun stood in her room, looking at photos of her wedding that she was about to tear down to make space for evacuees. "The walls come out too," said construction specialist Kong Min, holding a plasma torch. "We can fit maybe 40 people in here if we remove everything." "Do it, Lee," Sun said without hesitation. "My memories aren't worth more than someone else's life." The most dangerous job fell to electrical specialist Park Do and his team. They were ripping out life support systems from entire sections of the ship, knowing that whoever worked in those areas during the rescue wouldn't have air to breathe. "Sections 7 through 12 will be completely without atmosphere," Kim Woo reported to Captain Na. "Anyone working there during the rescue operation will need to wear emergency suits. But even those only have 6 hours of air. That's cutting." "It closed," Na replied, studying the timeline. "Who's volunteering for the dead sections?" Before she finished asking, every hand on the bridge shot up. Communications Officer Cho Min spoke for all of them. "Captain, we all joined the military to protect people. This is what we signed up for." Medical Officer So Yu was performing miracles in the sick bay, converting every piece of medical equipment into life-saving devices. "I'm turning the surgical beds into emergency stasis pods," she explained to her assistants. "We can put about 24 crew members into suspended animation to save oxygen, but the process is dangerous. We're using equipment in ways it was never designed for." Nurse Kime looked up from rewiring a heart monitor. "Doctor, what about the rest of the crew who will be working in the dead sections? We'll have to rely on emergency suits and hope. Their training keeps them alive," So Yu said grimly, as the third hour passed. The Defiant no longer looked like a military vessel. It had become something unprecedented, ship willing to destroy itself to save others. The moment the Defiant locked onto the New Dawn's docking port, everyone felt the crushing pull of the black hole grab their ship. The artificial gravity fluctuated as competing forces tried to tear both vessels apart. Captain Na watched the navigation display and felt her heart sink. They were now trapped in the same deadly spiral that was killing the colony ship. "All hands, this is the captain," Na announced over the ship-wide intercom, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was about to say. "We have successfully docked with the New Dawn. We estimate 90 minutes before both ships cross the event horizon. This will require us to maintain our current position until every last colonist is evacuated." She paused, knowing that her next words would change everything for her crew. "We will not be leaving the Kepler void. I repeat, this is a one-way mission." Ship fell completely silent. For a long moment, the only sounds were the groaning of metal under stress and the distant hum of failing life support systems. Then, from every deck, every corridor, every cramped workspace where her crew was preparing for the impossible, came the same response. "Understood, Captain. No arguments, no panic. No one asking to be transferred to an escape pod. Just acceptance of what needed to be done." In the engine room, Chief Engineer Kim Woo began the most dangerous procedure of his career. "I'm shutting down every safety protocol we have," he announced to his team. "We're going to push this reactor so far beyond its limits that it'll probably explode before the black hole gets us." "How much power can we get?" asked Assistant Engineer Thibault, already knowing he didn't want to hear the answer. "Enough to run the transporters at maximum capacity for maybe 2 hours," Wu replied. "But after that, we won't have enough energy left to power a flashlight, let alone escape engines."
Ow.
Evacuation began immediately. The first wave of colonists materialized in the main cargo bay, families clutching children, elderly people leaning on walking sticks, teenagers carrying babies. They looked around in confusion and terror, many of them injured from the New Dawn's failing life support systems. "Please remain calm," announced Medical Officer, "So you through the transport bay speakers? You are safe now. Follow the crew members in the blue uniforms to your assigned areas." But there was nothing calm about the scene. Children were crying. For parents who hadn't been transported yet, adults were demanding to know what was happening. Through it all, the Defiant's crew worked with quiet efficiency, guiding people to safety while knowing they would never see their own families. Again, Communications Officer Cho Min coordinated the transport patterns, watching the numbers climb on his screen. "First 1,000 evacuated, Captain. 49,000 to go."
Transport rate?"
Na asked. "We're moving about 800 people every 10 minutes, Chomin replied. "But, Captain, the colonists are panicking. Some are refusing to leave without." Family members who haven't been transported yet, Na nodded grimly. Fear and desperation were slowing down the rescue, and time was the one thing they didn't have. In the distance, the black hole's gravity continued pulling both ships toward an inevitable end. At the edge of the Kepler void, a growing collection of ships from across the galaxy had gathered to watch something that should have been impossible. What had started as a routine patrol had become the most witnessed event in recent galactic history. Commander Vekmar, of the reptilian saurid species, stood frozen on the bridge of the Harmony, his cold yellow eyes fixed on the sensor readings. His communications officer, Vextal, was broadcasting live updates to the Confederation fleet. With each report, more ships arrived to witness the unfolding drama. "Sir, the human vessel has now evacuated over 15,000 colonists," Vextal reported, his tentacles trembling with excitement. "Their power output is beyond anything we've ever recorded from a ship that size." "Impossible," Dekmar hissed. "Show me those readings again." On the main screen, energy signatures from the Defiant pulsed like a dying star. The ship was consuming power at a rate that should have melted its reactor core hours ago, yet somehow it kept running. "They've stripped their own vessel apart," observed Science Officer Clyden from his station. "Our long-range sensors showed that the human ship no longer has weapons, armor, or even basic life support in most sections. They've cannibalized everything to increase transport capacity." Word of the rescue spread through subspace communication networks faster than the ships could travel. On the bridge of the massive Corvin battleship Thunder of War, Captain Gorth watched the tactical display with growing amazement. Honorable death, the warrior species captain rumbled to his crew. But why do they not save themselves first? In Corvin culture, the strong survive to fight another day. Perhaps, suggested his tactical officer quietly, they define strength differently than we do. Admiral Kexron of the Aquatic Collective arrived in his sleek bioship, accompanied by 3 medical vessels. The ancient being had lived for over 3 centuries and commanded fleets in a dozen wars. But nothing had prepared him for what he was witnessing. Analysis, he gurgled to his science team through the water-filled communication chamber.
Can
the humans escape after completing the evacuation? Negative, Admiral, replied his chief scientist. They are now locked in the same decaying orbit as the colony ship. Even if they restored full power to their engines, they lack sufficient velocity to escape the gravitational well. Kexeron's tentacles writhed in distress. Then they are choosing certain death. For strangers, across the growing fleet of observers, similar conversations were taking place. The crystalline chattel debated the logic of the sacrifice in their harmonic language. The gas-based ethereals pulsed with confused energy patterns as they tried to understand human motivation. But the most important conversation was happening on a small transport vessel near the back of the fleet. Communications Technician Lee, hi, one of only 3 humans serving with the Confederation fleet, was quietly monitoring all the alien chatter while tears ran down her face. Her supervisor, insectoid mantid named Clickter, noticed her emotional state. Humanly high, he clicked in broken standard language. You are? Leaking water? Are you malfunctioning? No, High whispered, watching the power readings from the Defiant continue to climb impossibly higher. I'm proud. Proud of Death Mission. Proud that, when 50,000 strangers needed help, she said, her voice growing stronger, humans didn't calculate the cost. We just went. The alien bridge crew fell silent, processing this simple statement as they continued to watch their screens. With only 30 minutes left before both ships would be crushed by the black hole, the Defiant was dying around its crew. Metal screamed as hull plates buckled under forces no ship was designed to handle. Sparks showered from broken electrical systems, and the smell of burning circuits filled the air. Navigator Yumin had been at her station for 6 straight hours, fighting to keep the ship positioned next to the colony vessel while deadly radiation poured through the failing shields. Her hands trembled as she worked the controls, and her face had taken on the pale, sweaty look of severe radiation sickness. Transport pattern stable, she reported weakly, then suddenly collapsed forward onto her console. Engineer Kim Woo rushed from his engine monitoring station to take her place, his own hands shaking from exhaustion and radiation exposure. I've got navigation, he called out, even as blood trickled from his nose. How many more people? 3,000 left, reported medical officer. So you? Her voice barely above a whisper. The ship's failing life support had left most areas with dangerously low oxygen levels, and the medical team had been working without proper air for over an hour. But we have a problem. Captain Ney turned to face her, dreading what she was about to hear. Transport Bay 7 has a massive radiation leak, so you continued. The containment field failed 15 minutes ago. We can't use it anymore, and that was our primary evacuation point. Na studied the ship's layout on her cracked display screen. They had already converted every possible space into emergency evacuation areas. The remaining cargo bays were packed, beyond capacity with frightened colonists, and the corridors were so crowded that people could barely move. What about the main cargo bay? Asked Communications Officer Cho Min, though his suggestion was met with worried looks from the bridge. Crew, already at maximum capacity, so you replied. Captain, there's literally nowhere else to put people, unless... She trailed off, looking at the ship's emergency systems display. Everyone on the bridge understood what she was thinking, but nobody wanted to say it out loud. The outer cargo holds, Na said quietly. We blow the airlock and transport people directly into the unpressurized sections, Captain Cho. Min protested. That means I know exactly what it means, Na interrupted. Anyone working in those sections won't have air to breathe. They'll have maybe 10 minutes before they pass out from oxygen deprivation. The bridge fell silent, except for the constant alarms and the groaning of the ship's structure. Finally, Chief Engineer Kim Woo spoke up from the navigation station. "I'll coordinate the final transports from Cargo Bay 12, he said simply. It's closest to the colony ship's remaining evacuation points. "Kim, you won't survive that?" Na said. "Neither will those 3,000 people if we don't get them." "Off that ship," he replied. "Besides, someone has to make sure the transport coordinates are perfect. Can't afford any mistakes now." Within minutes, the final phase of the evacuation began, with crew members voluntarily entering the airless cargo holds to guide the last colonists to safety, knowing they were trading their lives for strangers they would never meet. The last escape pod launched from the Defiant just as the ship's main power finally gave out. Captain Lina watched the small craft streak away toward safety, carrying the final group of colonists they had pulled from the dying New Dawn. The mission counter on her screen showed the impossible number: 50,000 people evacuated, every single life saved. But now, the Defiant was truly dying. The ship that had once been home to 200 crew members was now a gutted shell, drifting helplessly toward the black hole that had already consumed the colony vessel. Emergency lighting flickered and died, leaving only the pale glow from a few backup systems. Around the bridge, the surviving crew members sat at their stations with quiet dignity. Engineer Kim Woo had made it back from the cargo bay, his face blue from oxygen deprivation, but alive. Medical Officer So Yu slumped in her chair, too weak to stand but still monitoring the life signs of her patients. Navigator Yu Min had regained consciousness and insisted on returning to her post, despite the radiation burns covering her arms. "Captain," Communications Officer Cho Min said softly, "we're receiving messages from the Confederation fleet. They want to attempt a rescue." Na almost smiled at that. "Tell them negative. They'd just be throwing away more lives." She looked around at her crew, these people who had chosen to die for strangers without a moment's hesitation. "But tell them something else first." She stood up from her command chair one final time, her legs shaky from exhaustion and radiation exposure. Through the view screen, she could see the event horizon of the black hole growing larger, space itself seeming to bend and twist as they approached the point of no return. "All stations prepare final transmission," Na ordered. "Broadcast on all frequencies. I want every ship in the galaxy to hear this." Chomin's fingers moved across his console, opening communication channels to the dozens of alien vessels watching from the void's edge. "Ready, Captain? You're broadcasting to ... everyone." Took a deep breath, thinking about her parents back on Earth, about the crew members who had died in the cargo bays, about the 50,000 people who would live because of what they had done here. "This is Captain Line of the human vessel Defiant," she began, her voice steady and clear despite everything. "Mission accomplished. All 50,000 colonists safe and en route to Confederation ships. Tell our families we did what humans do. We didn't leave anyone behind." She paused, looking at each of her crew members one last time. They were nodding at her, their faces showing pride instead of fear. "To anyone listening across the galaxy, this is what we believe. No life is worth less than another. No distance is too far to travel for those in need. No sacrifice is too great when it means others will live." The ship shuddered as they crossed. The event horizon and the bridge lights finally failed completely. Defiant out. The transmission cut to static as the ship vanished into the hungry darkness. But the message continued, racing across the galaxy at light speed. The rescue ships reached the escape pods within hours, pulling thousands of survivors from the small craft that had carried them to safety. As the colonists were brought aboard the Confederation vessels, many were still in shock from what they had witnessed. Children asked where the brave people who had saved them had gone. Parents wept as they realized that strangers had died so their families could live. Among the survivors was Dr. Park Soo, a colony medical officer who had been one of the last people evacuated from the New Dawn. They gave up everything. Told anyone who would listen. The human crew stripped their own ship apart to make room for us. I watched them work in areas without air, knowing they wouldn't survive. The story spread like wildfire across the galaxy's communication networks. Within days, every civilized world had heard about the human ship that chose death over abandoning people in need. News broadcasts played Captain Na's final transmission over and over, translating it into hundreds of languages. On the homeworld of the Saurid Confederacy, Commander Thekmar found himself watching the recordings for the 10th time. The reptilian officer who had once dismissed the rescue as impossible now felt something he had never experienced before: shame for his own cowardice. "I calculated the risks and chose safety," he told his assembled crew. The humans calculated the same risks and chose sacrifice. He paused, his yellow eyes reflecting the weight of his decision. "I am recommending humanity for immediate full membership in the Galactic Council. Any species willing to die for strangers deserves our highest respect." Admiral Kexron of the Aquatic Collective went even further. The ancient being used his considerable wealth and influence to establish rescue stations throughout the galaxy, all bearing the name Defiant Memorial. Each station was staffed by volunteers from different species, all inspired by the human example. "For 3 centuries, I believed strength meant the power to destroy enemies," Kexron announced at the memorial's dedication ceremony. "These humans have shown us that true strength lies not in the power to destroy, but in the courage to save those who cannot save themselves." But perhaps the most significant change came from an unexpected source. The ethereal collective, beings of pure thought, who existed beyond physical reality, rarely paid attention to the actions of material species. They considered themselves above the concerns of flesh and blood creatures, yet in their deepest archives, maintained in dimensions beyond normal space, a new entry appeared in their species database. It was written in the harmonic mathematics that only ethereals could understand. But when translated, it read simply, "Species Assessment, Humanity. Conclusion: they choose others' lives over their own. They sacrifice without hesitation for beings they have never met. Assessment: they are worthy of the stars and everything beyond them." The message that had begun as a desperate SOS from a dying colony ship had become something far greater. It was a declaration that echoed across the galaxy, changing how every species viewed humanity. They were no longer seen as dangerous newcomers or reckless adventurers, but as a people who valued life above all else, even their own. The galaxy would never be the same.